The last time I agreed to join a family dinner, I promised myself I'd keep my expectations low. But still, somewhere deep inside, I was hoping maybe, just maybe, things would be different this time. It was my mother's birthday, and she'd chosen the same upscale restaurant we used to pass by when we were kids, the one we were always too broke to even look at. Now, years later, she sat at its center table, surrounded by gold-plated menus, and the kind of family that only acknowledged your worth if it came with a dollar sign attached. I walked in quietly, wearing my simple navy blouse and slacks. My brother and sister were already there, dressed like they were heading to a fashion shoot. My sister's nails sparkled like glass, her lips freshly glossed, her eyes scanning me head to toe as if she were looking at an unpaid bill. My brother didn't even look up from his phone. My parents sat at the head of the table beaming with pride, just not at me. "Look who finally decided to show up," my father muttered, loud enough for the waiter to hear. I gave a small smile, brushing it off like I always did. My chair had been squeezed to the far end, half hidden behind a potted plant, like a last-minute pity placement. The conversation flowed like champagne, sparkling, expensive, and excluding me. My sister spoke about her upcoming wedding, which I wasn't asked to help plan. My brother boasted about his promotion, which was suspiciously given by one of Dad's old college friends. My mother laughed and clinked her wine glass, her earrings catching the light just as she looked at me and said, "So, you still doing, what was it? That side project? The one that doesn't pay?" I paused, my fork mid-air. I didn't correct her. I didn't tell her that the side project was now a growing consulting firm with 6 employees. I didn't mention the late nights, the contracts I had to fight for, or the fact that my clients respected me in ways my family never had. Instead, I nodded slowly and whispered, "Yeah, that." Then came the moment that still echoes in my mind like a slap. The waiter brought the wine list and handed it to me first, assuming I was the one paying. My father barked out a laugh. "Give that to someone who can afford it, son. She's not the one footing the bill. She barely has one." The entire table burst into laughter. Even the waiter hesitated, unsure if he should smile. My cheeks burned, not from shame, but from the realization that they hadn't changed at all. To them, I was still the girl who borrowed lunch money, still the daughter who never made the family photo wall, still the one they treated like a burden for dreaming instead of settling. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I simply folded the napkin on my lap, placed it on the table, and stood up. My mother glanced at me with annoyance. "Don't make a scene, sweetheart. Not here." I looked at her calm and composed. "Of course not," I said. "Why would I?" And with that, I walked out of the restaurant, but not out of their lives just yet. Because what they didn't know, what not a single person at that table realized, was that I had signed a deal 3 days ago. A deal that would put that exact restaurant, every chair, every table, every wine glass, under my name. And that was just the beginning. The air outside the restaurant was colder than I remembered, but it felt cleaner, lighter. As I stepped into the back seat of my rideshare, I opened my phone and stared at the email that had come in just a few days earlier. Subject line, "Final approval signed." It was real. The ink on the purchase agreement had barely dried, but the property transfer for the restaurant, yes, that restaurant, was official. I was now a silent partner in the hospitality group that had acquired it. It would take a few weeks for the full transition, but my name was already on the books. They had no idea whose wine glasses they were toasting with that night. I didn't do anything dramatic. I didn't rush back in to announce the news. This wasn't going to be a rage-fueled act of revenge. This was going to be surgical, precise, silent enough to echo. Over the next few weeks, I returned to that place more times than I could count. Sometimes for business meetings, sometimes just to sit in the corner and watch the staff who now worked for me. I learned everything: who managed the shifts, who controlled the reservations, who catered private events. Every detail mattered because I wasn't going to take away their dinner. I was going to take away everything they assumed they owned about me. While my parents were still busy planning my sister's over-the-top engagement party and my brother's graduation celebration, I was quietly buying into the real estate portfolio they didn't even know I had started. The name they laughed at that night, the one they mocked for being the poor one, was now being whispered in investor circles with growing respect. Then came the next delicious moment. I contacted the restaurant's creative director to suggest some interior upgrades. The art on the walls, the framed family photos in the back corner lounge, featuring past patrons and owners. I had a better idea. I want to create a new wall, I told them. Call it the Founder's Tribute. Photos of inspirational entrepreneurs who came from nothing. No fancy gowns, no black tie portraits, just grit, real stories. 2 weeks later, they emailed me a draft of the gallery layout, and I added one more name to the list. Mine. Not a corporate headshot, but an image of me from 5 years ago, standing outside a cheap co-working space with a backpack, coffee-stained shirt, and a dream that hadn't yet been laughed out of me. The caption under the photo read, "Self-funded, self-built, self-respected." By now, my sister's engagement party was in full motion. They had booked the same restaurant for the event, assuming nothing had changed. I approved it quietly. I didn't want to cancel. I wanted them to show up dressed in their judgment, expecting the world to revolve around them like always. And they did. I watched from the upstairs mezzanine as they entered. My mother in her sequined gown. My father giving out firm handshakes like he was the owner. My sister twirling her finger to show off the ring. They laughed loudly, ordered with arrogance, waved off staff like they were nothing. And then I made my quiet move. I walked down the stairs, dressed not in glitter or gold, but in the crisp black suit I wore when I signed my first $1 million deal. I didn't announce myself. I simply approached the manager and asked if the private room was ready. He nodded and said with a knowing smile, "Of course, Miss Carter. Everything's prepared as you instructed." The head waiter followed me, carrying a silver tray, not with food, but with an envelope. I approached the table. My parents looked stunned. My brother half choked on his drink. My sister blinked like I was an unwanted server who had wandered too close. "Can we help you?" my father asked, annoyed. I smiled. "Actually, I believe I'm here to help you." I placed the envelope on the table. My mother stared at it like it was toxic. "What is this?" she scoffed. "The updated agreement," I said. "This place isn't under the same management anymore. I thought you should know who owns it now before you run up a tab on my dime." My sister laughed nervously, but no one else did. My father opened the envelope, read the page, and his hands began to shake. "You bought this place? Number I built the foundation that bought it," I said softly. "I became everything you said I couldn't. And now I'm here to remind you, respect isn't a favor, it's a return on investment." I didn't wait for them to respond. I turned and walked away, every step echoing louder than their past mockery. Because revenge wasn't in the sting, it was in the silence that followed, and I wasn't done yet. Weeks passed after that unforgettable night. I hadn't heard a word from my parents or siblings, not a text, not a call. But the silence didn't sting, it healed. For the first time, I was no longer chasing their validation. I was building a life where their opinions didn't define my value. Then, one evening, I received a letter, handwritten, from my mother. It wasn't an apology, it was a request. She wrote that my father's company was failing, that his once prized investments were crashing, that they had put everything into appearances, parties, and pride, and now the bills were catching up. They needed a lifeline, and she hoped, no, assumed I'd help. After all, we were family. I folded the letter and set it aside, not with anger, but with finality. That weekend, I returned to the restaurant, not to confront, but to celebrate. I hosted a private dinner for the very people who believed in me when no one else did. My college roommate who lent me rent money, my first employee, my mentor. We toasted, we laughed, and we shared the table as equals. As I walked out that night, I passed a familiar face, my sister's husband. He had taken a side job, waiting tables to support their now fragile lifestyle. Our eyes met, He looked away, ashamed. I didn't say a word. I just nodded respectfully. That was the last piece of my closure. Not revenge that burned, but dignity that endured. And as the night breeze swept through the street, I smiled quietly. Because they may have once called me poor, forgettable, and less than, but now they sat beneath my roof, served at my table, and answered to the woman they once laughed out of the room. Poetic enough for me.